I'll start off with a question. How many people in the audience know someone who is affected by either type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, or gestational diabetes? Almost everyone in the audience knows someone who is affected by diabetes, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes on December 14th, 2007. I was a very sassy little kid. I was experiencing some of these signs to the left. I also had strep throat, which type 1 diabetes is commonly confused for. So I was experiencing very excessive thirst, constantly using the bathroom, had fruity breath, and I just looked like I was sick. I was diagnosed 6 days after my 5th birthday, which is that picture up on the top. That I was diagnosed 6 days after that picture. These symptoms are commonly misconstrued for stomach flu, sometimes even COVID these days, and that needs to stop. We need to start doing finger pricks at each checkup to make sure that type 1 diabetes is not the cause of these things, instead of just throwing it off to strep throat or the flu. So I'm going to talk about mental health and diabetes because this is commonly not talked about, especially with doctors. 3 in 5 people with type 1 diabetes experience mental health disorders, and that is simply because they're literally a human organ. They're constantly taking care of themselves because their pancreas doesn't. And just 3 in 10 people feel like they're in control of their type 1 diabetes. And that is how I felt in my middle school years. Type 1 diabetics are also very prone to develop eating disorders, depression, anxiety. Eating disorders is more because low blood sugars, you have to eat food, and it's said to be that insulin makes you gain weight, so that often continues on into a different disorder. So in middle school, I went through a really dark period in my life, and I kind of just hated myself and hated my diagnosis. I didn't want anyone to know that I was a type 1 diabetic. I didn't want anyone to come up and ask me questions. So I kind of just hid it. I decided to ignore it and hope that it would just go away, but with a chronic illness, that's not at all what happens. And I actually ended up in the hospital fighting for my life in diabetic ketoacidosis, which causes acid in your blood, and it can lead to coma, brain damage, or even worse, death. So that was not a fun experience, and it really showed me how doctors don't portray mental health and diabetes more. They constantly just push to the fact that they're unmotivated, lazy, or they don't understand why we can't just take care of ourselves. They don't understand why it's so hard to do that. And that's what I experienced in that hospital visit. Thankfully, during that hospital visit, I got my voice back, and I changed my perspective on having an illness and having type 1 diabetes, and I came out of that hospital visit a completely different person. I signed up for Teen Task Force, JDRF Teen Task Force, Katie Casey, which is my diabetes camp, and so many other things, which truthfully helped me get to the place I am today. These pictures up here are from my diabetes camp, some experiences with Teen Task Force, and just getting to get out there and volunteer and connect with people who knew what it was like to go through type 1 diabetes really changed my perspective. I am forever thankful for Katie Casey and JDRF for helping me turn into the person I am today. Since I went through that hospital visit, I have gotten to really get out of my comfort zone and use my voice for change. In 2019, I got to apply to the JDRF 2019 Children's Congress, which these pictures are of. I was one of the 4 delegates chosen from all over the world to represent Pennsylvania and Washington, D.C. to lobby for the special diabetes program and insulin affordability. I was also later chosen to be one of the 2 delegates to actually testify at that congressional meeting. That is me and Ruby Anderson. She was 9 at the time of the hearing, and we testified alongside Victor Garber, the CEO of JDRF, and someone from the National Health Institute. So it was a really cool experience to get to be able to share my story in that platform and let people know what I was experiencing. I also got to work specifically with Senator Bob Casey. That was him talking to me before my testimony and letting him know that my voice was going to do good things, and to just take deep breaths. Since then, I have written 2 books, and I've gotten to work with people like Nick Jonas and a whole bunch of different diabetes organizations to really portray the education of type 1 diabetes and all the problems that come with it. I will be returning to Katie Casey this summer as a counselor, and I am still in contact with JDRF. I now also run my own organization called T1D the Third, which is with 2 of my best friends I met at JDRF Children's Congress, and we are an international group that provides support for kids ages 4 to 20 with type 1 diabetes who don't really have that support during COVID right now because everything is shut down. We host like game nights and like little crafts and snacks for little type 1 diabetics, and honestly, it's a highlight of my month. I also have written 2 books that are published on Amazon, and have spoken with people who make modules for people going into education. So as someone who's going into education, I got to work with people who make those trainings for people with type 1 diabetes, and that has been amazing. So ultimately, just changing my perspective on my life and getting out of my comfort zone has led me to do so many amazing things. I encourage you to ask questions and make sure you have the correct information about having diabetes, because just having the correct information and asking questions makes type 1 diabetics feel so much more comfortable, and just like we're an ordinary human being instead of someone who lives with a chronic illness. Thank you.